The time is at long last here, ladies and Ulfwinners, for the YouTuber League Season 8 playoffs. And after 15 long weeks in the regular season to decide our 8 contenders, these teams presenting before us today have been deemed to be the best of the best, the strongest, the most agile, and perhaps the most battered teams to still be left standing after several months on the meat grinder that is the Blood Bowl pitch. These 8 teams are only 3 matches away from claiming the ultimate prize all players fight for, and they will put their all into eliminating the remaining competition until only one is left standing. By the end of this recap, 4 of our teams will have advanced one step closer to being the champion, while the remainder are sent back home in disappointment or returned back to the damnation from which they came from. However, it is important to note that one of our original top 8 finalists, the Jailhouse Rockers, were unable to commit to the final hurdle before them due to an unnatural circumstance in the old worlds, as Black Templar's personal chance to Nuffle, or PC as you common folk may call it, were left unanswered, and due to the crisis placed upon the coach, he has ultimately decided to spare his remaining Skaven and Goblins from their impending demise. As a result of this, Roger Def and his Chaos Dwarves, who were originally robbed their place in the playoffs thanks to the Rockers' final victory against the Large Legends, are taking back their spot in the brackets for one final chance to murder everyone who gets in the way of the Dwarves and their claws. But I have kept you waiting for far too long. The greatest sport in the old world awaits you, so let us dive into the matches and see which of our 8 teams are one step closer to the finals. Here to kick off the playoffs, we have the number 1 ranked team, How Not to Contain Lizards, coming in at 1580 team value, with their team being more Amazon than Lizard at this point, as they go up against the Cursed Suffering, who go into this match at 1430 team value. The Chaos Dwarves may very well be the best team to fight the Lizardmen right now, for the number of dodgy players our cold-blooded team are bringing to this game means very little with the tackling prowess of the Dwarven blockers, helping to equalize the playing field while providing a large portion of extra inducements for the sufferers. Jax is also going to be a terror on the field, as he can bully the source around without effort, while also running circles around him in the process. But he may have to do the majority of the heavy lifting himself, as with only 2 guard players to assist him, will it be enough to pull off the upset once again, as these 2 teams had already just faced off against each other in the final rounds of the regular season, with the Cursed Suffering somehow securing victory. It is time to see if lightning can strike twice, for securing a victory here will rob the Lizards of their championship title, which the crowd seems to dread the thought of, as they take matters into their own hands, tearing through the Dwarves' formation before the match can even begin, giving their favored Lizards the window they need to wedge a hole through their lines. Catalina hangs in the back line of the Lizardmen's side of the field, keeping a safe breath from the Bull Centaurs, while the Source plows through the line of the already reeling Dwarves. However, whether the Lizards were hoping to cause some casualties for this drive, or merely trying to stall out the clock, the stunned players had started to recover from the fans' intervention, and suddenly the momentum started to fade for our reptilian team, as suddenly the Source were separated and vulnerable to the retaliation that was about to befall them, prompting Catalina to make her move, attempting a short pass over to Alex Kimi in the hopes of scoring a touchdown. But with the very sunny weather blinding the Skink's vision, she fumbles the ball, leaving Dalinar to come rushing in and reclaim it in the Skink's stead. The Source come rushing in after a sprinting Bull Centaur, turning the entire field into one big massive brawl, as now players were scattered all across the pitch, locked into a battle to the death. And the sound of the crowd was deafening, as even the Skinks, whether willing or not, took part in the fighting. All the while, Dalinar was stuck having to fend off against Susanna and Ciri as he struggled to make an escape with the ball. He wouldn't have to wait long before his teammates finally came in on a defending source, for his skinks were finally being removed from the field, giving the sufferers the numbers advantage they needed to put an end to the stalemate and secure the first touchdown of the match, threatening to repeat the Dwarven victory as we go into halftime. Only a single skink was unable to recover from their injuries in the ensuing brawls thus far, as the dwarves get the offensive drive going into the next kickoff. The lizards attempt to counter with a wide defensive formation, hoping to swing their way around the dwarven lines to rush down Larry Butts carrying the ball. But with no players in the center field, the reptilians ultimately fall victim to being completely surrounded across the line of scrimmage, giving the sufferers full reign on the pitch early in the drive. Slowly the hobgoblin made his way up the center of the field as the fans finally get a happy helping of blood in this game, with rapid near-fatal injuries on both source and dwarf alike, with the apothecary coming in to prevent Susanna from her career coming to an end. The shredding power of Riza's claws also comes into play for this match, as the lizardmen were suddenly down 2 sources, spiraling the game out of control for How Not to Contain Lizards, as now they were nearly outnumbered 2-1. But through some unexpected dodges out of their tackle zones, Larry was finally brought down from his constant taunting of the lizards, bringing the match once again to a massive brawl to determine who would get away with the ball. The restrained lizards tried desperately to make a comeback in the ensuing chaos that was unfolding before them, and while Catalina was able to secure the ball for her team, she was rapidly sent back down to the ground, surrounded by dwarves on all sides, and with no window to escape. Surrounded and battered, nothing more could be done, however, for our lizard team. As the call to the end of the match played, the upset had happened once again, as our reigning number 1 team is eliminated from the playoffs and allowed to curse suffering to advance to the semi-finals. With a team value of 1530 going into this match, it is the Leg-Lickers as they face off against their ancient rivals from the north in the Godlike Puns, coming in with a team value of 1660. This match is a much anticipated game, with both sides very likely to suffer injuries once the players start to hit the floor. It comes to no surprise that to help offset their lack of armor, the Leg-Lickers have an absurd amount of block and dodge players to help keep them standing for the brawl to come. And that is not including the 5 guard players the ladies have to throw onto the line of scrimmage. But the Godlike Puns are no slouches either, as both Oath Winners are just as capable of dodging the blows coming at them as the Amazons can. And with the opposing presence that is the Yeti thought that counts, the Norsemen can very well bully the ladies around the pitch, leaving it down to Nuffle to decide which of these 2 teams are going to advance to the round of 4. The Amazons get the offensive drive to start off our match, and they do not skip a beat, as even with the rain pouring down onto the field, the ladies immediately move into formation around Freyja, and with the inducement spent to hire Helmet Wolf, the human chainsaw fanatic masquerading as a goblin, the Leg-Lickers had a lot of power to bring onto the field. The Godlike Puns timidly keep the ladies at arm's length, with several of their players already on the ground dazed from the blows thrown at them. But when an overextension occurs on the cage, the Puns capitalize on it, throwing Thought That Counts onto Freyja and blitzing her down along the edge of the field. The ensuing chaos to come is a spectacle of a brawl for all fans present. After Helmet manages a dodge to take out the Brazen Yeti, more players get removed from the pitch, causing both teams to be deadlocked along the line of scrimmage. Bouncing all across the field, neither side are able to safely secure the wandering ball, as the booming crowd threatened to drown out the torrential downpour with the violence they were rewarded with. However, the blood spilled was very minor, even with the chainsaw star player on the field. But that was not significant, with the number of players that were still being removed from the ensuing brawl that continued on for the remainder of the half. And while both teams were able to briefly recover the ball, their opposition made certain that there would be no touchdown to come from this mindless violence, as we go into the second half of the match at a scoreless game. Both teams are 11 players strong for the next kickoff, promising for a continued brawl as the Godlike puns are now receiving the ball. And with the apothecary recovering the injuries on thought that counts, the Norsemen were more than eager to return the pain that had been brought to them. Making sure to not repeat the same mistakes made by the Legalickers, the puns pushed cautiously along the sideline of the field, relying on their raw strength to overwhelm the ladies should they attempt to make a play for the ball. And as the numbers dwindled down rapidly in the early portions of the second half, the Legalickers' window to steal the ball were looking to vanish along the winds of the constant storm. Their agility got them within striking distance, however, despite the deficit in numbers. But the blows came too slow to catch barely out it on off guard, as he weathers every single strike that gets sent his way. It wasn't until Thought That Counts slips on the wet grass after sprinting into the Amazon lines that the Legalickers rallied back in this game, as they managed to break free from the brawl to get a surround on the ball, and finally sack the Norseman runner down. Eager for the chaos of the brawl to continue once again, the fans cheered on our competing teams as only minutes remained on the clock, as another scoreless half meant this game would go into overtime, and I would not be lying if I wasn't secretly hoping to see that as well. The ball, however, bounces in the Godlike pun's favor, and to the fans' disappointment, Mars Covid is able to get the touchdown his team needed to finally decide the outcome of this match, as the Godlike puns are now advancing to the semifinals. Coming in with a team value of 1660, we have the reichlin All Elite as they continue the long-lasting rivalry between humans and orcs as they face off against Fluffy Green, who sit at a team value of 1710. Both these teams are nearly even in the values, with the All Elite just bringing in slightly more guard and mighty blow to help even out the muscle on the field. But Mr. Socks, with his pilot-on antics, is promising to be a nightmare on the pitch, and with Mr. Snout's insane agility allowing him to dive in on any half-hearted cage, brings the hope of a full-on brawl as the teams scramble for some loose balls. But reichlin still have CM Punk, the powerhouse of their team, as he brings his added strength to the match, paired alongside John Moxley, who after narrowly avoiding death not so long ago, has been training hard for this upcoming game, bringing some added finesse of his own as he threatens to take over Orange Cassidy's role as the dedicated ball carrier. Both teams are ready to start off the match, but not before reichlin hired the services of a local wizard, using a large portion of their own gold to try and give them the slight edge for our upcoming game. Will it be enough? We will know very soon. A riotous crowd starts off the match, as both players and fans alike trash talk each other down, building up the excitement for the match as the fists start flying, with the Greenskins starting off our game with the offensive drive, benefiting from an early touchback as Mr. Snouts takes hold of the ball. With the early momentum, the Orcs hope to capitalize, but reichlin are able to stand their ground, retaliating back with the first casualty of the match. And when the Orcs tightly formed up their cage with the player deficit, the Wizard strikes down upon their team, allowing reichlin to completely surround the Greenskins on all sides. Fighting desperately to recover, Fluffy Green is eventually forced into losing the ball, and with Paul White being the one ogre to recover it, there was almost nothing that could be done to pry the ball back for the Orc team. The Orcs could only hope to minimize casualties as they struggled to regain their posture, with the only thing going for them so far for the remainder of the first half was the ever-watchful gazes of the referee, ejecting all the despicable players who attempted a foul on the battered brutes. But pride has been a downfall of many striving humans, and when the Ogre Runner opted to give the ball to John Moxley, Fluffy Green took full advantage of it, knocking the up-and-coming star down a peg, and with less than a minute left in the first half, Fluffy Green may have just recovered from suffering a terrible 0-1 deficit in their offensive drive. Striking faster than lightning, however, John Moxley picked himself back up to sack down Mr. Dead, and with him standing his ground against the final blows thrown his way, he evades the shame of failure as he finally claims his prized touchdown as we go into halftime. Beaten and battered throughout the first half, the Orcs' resilience truly shows in this game, as they retain a full roster on the field, with the ejections from reichlin's fouling putting the human team down to 10 players. This may be just the break Fluffy Green needs if they can grind down the All-Elite quickly enough to beat them through attrition. But with another touchback to kick off the second half, Reichlin would not give them the chance, as Orange Cassidy immediately makes for a break for the end zone, never looking back at the impending death that awaits them should the Orcs get their hands on him. But thanks to some well-placed tackles by the human lineman, Cassidy gets the immediate touchdown he was hoping for, putting Fluffy Green on the edge of elimination, as the score is now 2-0 for the Reichlin All-Elite. The clock is now counting down towards the end of the season for Fluffy Green, as they are now forced into a very uncomfortable position of having to play for a quick touchdown, over their usual tactics of grinding down their opposition. On the kickoff, a glimmer of hope sparked for the Greenskins as Paul White suffers swift retribution for his slight to the Orcs earlier in the match, allowing Fluffy Green to snowball out of control with rapid injuries on the Ogre and Orange Cassidy, bringing the humans down to 8 players as they struggle now to stall out the game for their victory. Mr. Sox leads the charge forward as the human linemen continue to crumble under the weight of their boots. But with time running out rapidly, Mr. Donkey is finally able to secure the touchdown to get the Orcs on the board, but only at the final moments of the game, cementing Reichlin All-Elite's victory over Fluffy Green and putting the human team into the semifinals. Coming in at 1,590 team value for their round of 8 match is the fragile Bloodmarks as they face off against their opponent Omega Eta Alpha, who are sitting at 1,600 team value. The teams are incredibly close for this game, with the last minute purchase of lineman money for the Elves, allowing for a 2-player reserve for the beatdown that is about to commence. The Bloodmarks will need all the help they can get too, as Omega Eta Alpha are not afraid to get their hands dirty. It is only a small comfort to the Bloodmarks that they don't have to avoid 2 block mummies on the pitch, as Scythe's second mummy Ogre was killed earlier in the season, limiting the front line of Omega Alpha to being all but invincible as rookie Mummy Silas attempts to fill in Ogre's place on the roster. It is a battle of speed versus power, and there's only one way to know who's going to come out on top, as Omega Alpha get the first defensive drive to start off our match. And with 2 stunned Elves and another knocked off the pitch on the kickoff, the Undead take full advantage of their early momentum as they press hard onto the elven screen before them. The cage is airtight, as already the Bloodmarks are getting dominated on the field, with all failed attempts to pressure the ball only succeeding in getting the team pushed back yard after yard towards their end zone, all the while losing more players in the process, which includes the Elves' key thrower Phone, who will be out of the game with a serious concussion. The new lineman Money attempts to make an impression in his debut match and takes matters into his own hands, fouling Party Boy in a desperate attempt to rally the faltering Elves to fight back. But he only manages to widen the gap further, as he is immediately ejected from the game, removed from the field alongside his white victim. Once the Bloodmarks were down to 6 players, were the Undead ready to make their move towards the end zone. Content with the damage caused, to their elven opponents. Omega Alpha loosened up their cage in preparation to break through their screen, but with Fan Wild and the two mummies leaving a gap in their guard, Sploosh dived in on the opportunity he was waiting for, and with one successful sack of the ball, the table shifted completely as Face makes his way to Omega Alpha's end zone with the ball in hand. The ghouls are unable to keep up with the amazing speed of the elven catcher, as after spending the entire half being the punching bag to the undead horde, the fragile Bloodmarks secured a 1-0 lead going into the second half. It was a miraculous turnaround for the Bloodmarks. However, the team had still suffered heavily for their hard-earned touchdown, as even with the additional reserve players for this match, they were still down to 9 players for the second half. But it is the Elves' offensive drive this kickoff, as securing a touchdown now will all but secure their place in the semifinals. Sploosh is the first to reach the ball on the kickoff, but disaster strikes as he fumbles the ball attempting the quick pass over to Paper, which had the ghouls of Omega Alpha immediately on top of them, as Pledge Limp Bart opens up a path for Lamar to make a play to steal the ball from right under the Elves' noses. The play, however, costs the ghoul his unlife, as Sploosh swiftly puts an end to his Blood Bowl career. And upon reclaiming the ball, Paper manages to complete a pass to Kerplunk as he safely screens himself behind Omega Alpha's backline. It wasn't long afterwards for the Elves to secure their second touchdown of the game, leaving Omega Alpha in a very difficult position of having to completely demolish the Bloodmarks if they want the slightest chance of tying up the game and going into overtime. With no other option available to Omega Alpha, the Undead recklessly dive onto the Elven lines and start very strong for next kickoff, but the Bloodmarks were more than content with just hanging back, just out of reach of the mummies and stalling out the clock. Blood continued to spill to the fans' delight, but in the end, the bell was tolling for the end of Omega Eta Alpha's run, with Otter finally getting the Undead team on the board, but only at the very end of the match, settling the game at a 2-1 victory for the fragile Bloodmarks, as they are our final team to advance to the top 4. Only 4 teams now remain, as we've had nail-bitingly close slugfest, miraculous comebacks, and astonishing upsets, and the competition is only going to get more intense from here, for our next semi-final matchups will pair the Cursed Suffering up against the Godlike Puns, while reichlin All Elite gets a chance for some payback against the fragile Bloodmarks next week. Thank you everyone for watching, and I will see you next time.